New Zealand police claim the raids were in response to concrete terrorist threats from Indigenous activists. 20 people are facing charges under the Arms Act in a trial that could take several years. We're here to show our tautoko and support for the families and the whānau of the people in Ruatoki. When the police went in to arrest 3 people, they held a whole community under firearms. They raided houses, they held guns to babies' heads, they made women lie on the ground spread eagle. New Zealand likes to report this myth of really good race relations. It's all bullshit. Last year was an attempt to squash the mana mutahake of Tūhoi and to tell Māori people in a very real, and a very brutal and a very forceful way that our rights to self-determination and sovereignty will not be recognised and will in fact be squashed by the New Zealand settler state. I'm here to give my greetings to Tamaiti and the 18 other defendants who are being repressed by the New Zealand state for continuing the fight that our ancestors have always fought since our country was invaded by the same colonisers that invaded this country, the same colonisers that invaded Canada, and the same colonisers that invaded the United States. How dare they treat us and call us terrorists when the land you're standing on is founded by state-sponsored terrorism. Last year, the United Nations passed a Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Only 4 nations refused to sign the declaration to recognise at an international law level our rights to self-determination. Those states were New Zealand, Australia, Canada and the United States. Shame! What colonial states try to do is to make you forget the pain and the suffering and the blood that was shed when our countries were invaded by colonial forces. What Ruatoki reminded me of is that hasn't changed.
Kia ora, my name's Nick Kelly. As introduced, I'm the president of the Wellington Tramways Union. I'm also a member of the Workers' Party. We're a new political organisation and we stand for anti-imperialism, anti-colonisation, anti the things that the state represented up there do to the people of New Zealand every day. In 2001, the New Zealand government passed the anti-terror laws. This was in response to the 9/11 attacks and was supposed to prevent such terrorism happening in New Zealand. But surprise, surprise, the only people that this law has been used against have been Tūhoi and social justice activists. Now I happen to know quite a few of the people who were arrested by the state 1 year ago today. Those people have been involved in the anti-war movement. Those people were involved in the G3 Aotearoa movement. Those people have been involved in a number of social justice causes. And it is no surprise that the state decided to make a target of them and to try and demoralise progressive movements in New Zealand. And what we're here today saying is they have failed because those people are still involved and we are still involved. We are not intimidated by the New Zealand state and its attempts to threaten us with their anti-terror laws.
I've been an activist in New Zealand for a number of years. I'm also a member of the Workers' Party of New Zealand along with Nick Kelly, and I'm an academic at Victoria University. I thoroughly agree with the comments that have already been made by my comrades here today, but what I want to highlight is that New Zealand's anti-terror laws, just like other similar laws that have been in place in other countries such as the United States and Australia, are part of systematic oppression against certain groups of people in society. And in particular with the anti-terrorism laws, these laws were put in place, these laws were acted upon in order to nail down very specific activists that the police had been trying to get hold of for a number of years. It's part of systematic oppression, systematic violence against anyone that shows dissent against the New Zealand government.
The repression of Indigenous people isn't just particular to Aotearoa. I'd like to welcome my sister here, Liz Thompson. She's just been spending time with Lex Waton, who's facing trial in Brisbane as we speak, and he and the people of Palm Island have felt the full force and the boot of the state. Kia ora, Liz.
In November 2004, the Palm Island community was invaded by federal police under very similar conditions to the raids that occurred against Tuhoi people in Rautuki. This was in response to an action that the Palm Island community had taken against the police and the courthouse, the watch house and the home of Senior Sergeant Chris Hurley, because a Palm Island man had died in police custody. The police investigation and the coroner's report suggested that a man who had 4 broken ribs and a liver that was split in 2 had died as the result of an accidental fall on the steps of the Palm Island watch house, despite the fact that the entire Palm Island community had heard evidence from a witness who was in the watch house at the time, Roy Bramwell, who had witnessed Senior Sergeant Chris Hurley repeatedly assaulting Murungi Dumaji. The Palm Island community took action on the 24th of November, at which the police, the courthouse, the watch house and the home of Senior Sergeant Chris Hurley was burned down. Lex Waton has been picked out as the scapegoat, as a representative. He's a respected Palm Island councillor and long-time activist. He's now facing trial in the Brisbane District Court on a charge of riot with destruction. It's been interesting to witness the trial and the level of repression that followed, not just in the immediate aftermath of Murungi's death, but in relation to the investigation against Lex Waton and other members of the Palm Island community, including his mother Agnes, 65 years old. She faced a 9-week trial at which charges against her were eventually dropped. The witnesses that the prosecution has subpoenaed against Lex Waton include other members of the Palm Island community who in the 2 days following the riot were held in the police watch house. A young woman, Tiana Friday, who was 4 months pregnant at the time, was held in the watch house for 8 hours without food, without water, and just having witnessed her home, her auntie's home and her uncle's home being turned upside down by the police. Under those circumstances, she gave a statement implicating Lex Waton in certain actions. When on the stand, she acknowledged that she would have said absolutely anything to get out of the hands of the police just 1 week after a man had died in police custody on Palm Island. This is in a circumstance where since 1990 there's been 250 Aboriginal deaths in custody.
Shame!
One of those has been investigated. The only one that has been investigated and in which there's been a trial of those involved has been the death of Murungi Dumaji, and that only occurred because the Palm Island community refused to accept the ruling that it was an accident. And it's those actions for which several Palm Island residents are currently in jail on charges of arson and for which Lex Waton's being trialled. So I hope that people can continue to give their support for Lex Waton. The trial's going to go for another couple of weeks. You can find out more information and daily reports about the trial of Lex Waton on the National Indigenous Times website, which is www.nit.com.au. There's a lot of white Australians who like to say things like, oh, you know, where's the leadership in Indigenous communities with all these crises going on? Well, the leadership of Indigenous communities is mostly in prison. The percentage of Aboriginal people in prison in this country is a scandal. And if we allow a leader like Lex Waton to go to jail for actually preventing the cover-up of an Aboriginal death in custody, it'll be an indictment on all of us.
All we have is each other to stand together and to be strong, and to realise that our fight for self-determination and sovereignty will never cease. No matter what the state does, no matter how they oppress us, no matter how they repress our leaders, we will carry on fighting for self-determination until we are free. Kia ora.
Stand up and fight for Indigenous rights and sovereignty.